Hey, everybody, and welcome back to another episode of Bulletproof Selling. My name is Sean Rhodes. I'm the Chief Sales Sergeant here at Bulletproof Selling and author of the book Bulletproof Selling, a guide for systemizing sales on the battlefield of business. Now, here at Bulletproof Selling, the one thing we believe above all else, the thing that keeps people alive on the battlefield, and the thing that keeps sales moving through a pipeline is that hope is not a strategy. Not a strategy in battle, not a strategy in sales. And so we are here every single week, multiple times a week, often enough, to help you remove hope from how it is that you sell. Now, here at Bulletproof Selling, we have been honored to have had as guests on this show best-selling authors, Hall of Fame speakers, consultants, sales leaders, and those that are out there in the field today managing sales teams. And it's my commitment that out of every single one of these episodes, whoever I bring on as a guest, we're going to build a sales system together that you can use no matter the size of your goals or the size of your business. Now, as I'm out there speaking to organizations across the country, it's always great to run into those sales leaders that understand the difference between leadership and management. And believe it or not, there is a difference. There's a difference between micromanaging your people, driving them to do every single process that they possibly can, every single system, and those sales leaders that are out there understanding that every salesperson is going to operate in a slightly different market. And while there are things that we need to do that remain ethical, the things that we need to do to remain up to date on tracking pipeline, on tracking prospects through our process, there still comes a time when we have to let salespeople do what it is that they do that is uniquely them. It doesn't mean they don't jump off of all the systems altogether, but it does mean that we need to focus on the systems that we know are going to serve them best. And that's why when I ran into this sales leader that we're having as a guest on our show today, I knew that it was exactly the type of leader that was able to walk that line, because for a lot of junior leaders, they want to make sure that every single system is in place. Every single system is being used for their salespeople. And then there are those leaders that are in a different business model that want to make sure that their salespeople are finding success with whatever systems work for them. And that's why it's my pleasure to welcome to the show today the CEO of Coastal One Financial Advisors, Mr. Charles Reiling. Charles, welcome to Bulletproof Selling.
Thank you very much, Sean. Happy to be here.
So, Charles, tell us a little bit about your journey through sales. I mean, obviously, you're leading a bunch of salespeople today, but walk us through how you got to that position.
Well, Sean, it goes back to 1996. I needed a job, and a friend of mine who was a financial advisor at a large wirehouse firm. He and I were having coffee one morning. We were chatting about it. I was actually just wrapping up my last year of law school, and I had not done a great job in planning out my finances. I thought I'd had enough to get me through. I was going at night, and I simply didn't. So I was lamenting my misfortune, I guess, that morning over coffee. And he said, you really should come work with me. I said, what do you do? And he said, well, I'm a financial advisor. And I said, I don't know the first thing about that. And he laughed a little bit, and he said, you don't need to know too much. He said, you have to be good with people, which you are, and willing to work hard, which I got into the business that I remain in today, nearly 30 years later.
And how many salespeople do you have that you are actively overseeing? And then we'll get into a little bit about how that sales model is unique in the world of sales.
Today, it's 150.
Wow.
Throughout the country. We do have a few acquisitions, and I can't get into details on those, but once those are finished, it'll be close to 500.
And what makes Coastal One unique in the field of financial advising? Because I know, I've been in contact with people from Prudential and Morgan Stanley, and every financial advisor in the world, I feel like, has gotten in touch with me over the years. But your folks are definitely not new in the industry. They're more experienced. So talk to us a little bit about what makes that model different as far as their experience in sales.
They certainly are. When it comes to this industry, there are many different business models like there are in any other industry. Some are a bit more prescribed, and they're more or less run by the company. And others, like ours, we consider ourselves a support firm for independent financial advisors. And those are people who have experience in the industry. They've done this for, in many cases, a long time. Many of them cut their teeth at some of the larger firms, learned how they wanted to do business, and then came to the realization that they didn't want to be told how to do it anymore. So then they join a firm like ours. We're considered to be an independent model brokerage firm in the industry. That's a very specifically defined term, and what it means is we support independent financial advisors who are not our employees. Rather, they rely upon us for certain specific support services. Those are access to a clearing firm to clear their trades and do their business and issue their statements, and compliance and regulatory expertise and advice. We're really a support firm for independent financial advisors that are located in their own communities, that serve their own book of business that they developed over the years, and we're here just to make them a little bit better.
And so it's interesting because in a lot of sales leaders that we've brought on the show, they're managing teams that are within a single organization. They're held to all follow the same process and standard. They're all held to the same pipeline goals each week. And your folks, it sounds like, are literally the cowboys and the cowgirls out there. You don't want to have to micromanage them. They're already bringing sales skills, or they wouldn't be part of your organization. That presents a whole new set of challenges, I'd imagine.
That's correct. I think, if you liken it to, and look, Sean, I wasn't in the military, but I know that we've talked about this a little bit. If you liken it to a plan that you have on a battlefield, right? Mm-hmm. Not everything goes right. So you need to lay out a very basic plan of what you're trying to accomplish, and that needs to be adaptable. Mm-hmm. And that's really what we're most like. We're not here to micromanage our people. We're not here to tell them exactly how to get things done. We are here to support them. They lay out the plan. They might come to us for advice and feedback and input, and we'll gladly give that. But it's up to each of the individual people that we support to accomplish the goals that they've set for themselves every day. And we try and contribute to that in what way we can.
And it's interesting you mentioned that some of the best leaders that I had in the military, not just of me, myself, and I, but I'm out there with dozens of units in any given week. And I saw great leaders and poor leaders. The greatest ones were doing exactly what you just talked about. Here's the mission. Here's the objective. You need to make a plan for yourself. And if you would like to run that by me, I'm here because I've been on a lot of missions. I can help you assess that, whether that's a good idea or a bad idea. But ultimately, it is up to you to find success. And as a leader, I'm here to support you, but that's as far as I can go because I'm not on the battlefield with you, kicking down doors, talking to prospects in your cases. So I'm curious to know then if you've got salespeople that have already reached a pretty high level of expertise. They know how to prospect, they know how to contact people, they know how to have great sales conversations, or they wouldn't be working for you in the first place. Where do you find even these senior level folks relying on hope, perhaps more than they should, in how they manage their prospecting, how they develop business? Where does hope enter the picture for those that still rely on it more than they should?
I think, I've thought about this. I think hope is too often misconstrued, or it's often used incorrectly as a substitute for a well-laid plan. Right? You can't hope your way to success. You can't do that, right? So let's not confuse that. Let's not rely on, I hope I get there one day. That that alone is not going to get anybody anywhere, right? So you really have to focus, knuckle down, do the hard work it takes to put a plan together. Establish what your goal is. Put the plan together that's going to get you there, and you get there in very tidy incremental steps. And you can't hope your way into getting any of those things done.
It's interesting. So like when we're in the early stages of our sales career, a lot of us, me included, we needed really specific plans because I need to know almost, down to the hour and definitely sometimes to the minute, how I'm going to spend my time to make sure at the end of the day, I didn't mess around on social media. I was actually making calls, making connections, scheduling meetings, doing all the things I needed to do as a salesperson. And I noticed that even as I get more experienced in sales and all the senior salespeople that I get to talk to around the world, they almost let go of what made them successful in the first place because they do get unconsciously competent. I know I don't need to be messing around on social media. I know I need to make calls, so I do that, but that really lets go of the plan. So at the end of the quarter, they look back and say, where are the results that I thought I was going to get? And I ask them, well, what was the plan that you executed against? Well, I didn't have a plan. And do you find that happens with senior salespeople sometimes as well?
No doubt. I smiled a little bit when you were referencing on your career because I can remember my career. We had a very specific program we were given as to how to achieve success. We were given the roadmap, and the roadmap back, rules have changed since then. Back in those days, cold calling was the way that you built a book of business. Today, that is not the primary way it gets built, because there are certain regulations that come in place that make that much harder. But back then, we were told that statistics held that if you made 300 outbound dials a day, you were going to talk with 100 people, right? Again, not easy to do today because everybody's got call screening and they don't answer the phone. But back then, that didn't exist. So you made 300 dials, you talked to 100 people, you'd have some substantive conversation with a third of them, and you'd wind up with a third of them getting appointments, and out of all that, you'd close a deal. So it took 300 outbound phone calls to get one deal. And if you came in and did that every day, you were going to succeed. Right? It was breaking it down to small increments. And then what happens is you've had some success and you have built that book of business, and maybe you've got a little bit comfortable, right? And you stop making those 300 outbound phone calls, or whatever it is you do today to build that book of business. And you mentioned social media. There are so many more distractions today that didn't exist 30 years ago. I walked into my office, I sat down, I had a phone, and I had a list of people to call, and that's all I had, right? I didn't have the internet pinging me. I didn't have Facebook. I didn't have LinkedIn. I didn't have all these other avenues, some of which, if you use correctly, they can be very good. But a whole lot of distraction if you don't use them correctly. And it detracts from focus. You need to focus. And it's a hard thing to do today.
It is. So I think the sales system that we should build then, because we have a lot of salespeople on this show that are at the newer end of their career, but I know even all of the folks that you have in Coastal One, maybe they're in the middle or the later part of their sales career, they're unconsciously competent in a lot of things. Put them in front of a prospect, they can make it happen. And so I find a lot of salespeople, especially on the senior end, they still know that they need to improve, but it's tough to know how to exactly go about doing that because they're already so good at so many things as it applies to sales. And so if they want to earn more or they want to make more connections, it becomes tough because there's a psychological term or a neurological term for this, the ruts that we have in our brain. We're just so used to doing things a certain way. To deviate from those is actually more difficult because we can do a lot of things, pick up the phone, have a great conversation, or meet with someone, make that happen. We want to change how we do it, though. Well, that requires a little bit of effort, requires a new system. So I'd love to build a system with you, Charles, that's going to help even a senior salesperson assess where are the areas that I can still improve, and how do I go about building a plan, to your point, to make that happen? So when we talk about building sales systems, we're removing hope from how we sell, even as a senior salesperson, not relying on hoping that the 10,000 calls I've had are all going to come back to me when I get that next objection or have to make a new plan in my process. So we use this acronym TRIM because we're trimming hope away from our sales. The T in TRIM is the trigger element. So let's say I'm one of your senior salespeople, Charles, and I know that I should probably be getting better in this one area, or I want to explore this new avenue of sales, whether it's social media or whether it's hosting events that I can invite all of my clients and all their friends and their network to in order to grow my prospect base, whatever it is I want to try that's new. What is the trigger element for this? How do I know that it's time for me to make a change, even if I'm a senior salesperson?
It's a great question. I think, well, good salespeople know when they are not achieving their goals, right? They know that. So I think it's really self-awareness and self-recognition, right? The trigger event for a good experienced person, they know when they're not doing the right things anymore. They know when they're letting things slide. They know when they're allowing themselves to get distracted. They know when they're bored, right? And maybe that's the trigger event. Maybe
that might be.
Let me try something different because, frankly, I've been doing it this way for 20 years, and while it works, I'm just getting a little tired of doing the same thing. Let me try something new. Let me mix it up a little bit, right? We have senior advisors today that you would not imagine knew the first thing about social media, but they're wildly interested in it, and they're interested in how they can incorporate that into their practice. One of the things we've done is we've hired for the firm a chief marketing officer, which is a new concept for us. And we're actually expanding her team so that we can essentially handle marketing requests for those advisors of ours, right? In the old days, it used to be, hey, advisors market, and that's on them, and they do it themselves, right? Again, in the interest of being a supportive firm and helping our advisors, we've heard from a lot of them that, we know we should be doing things on the marketing front. We don't know how to do it. So we've gone out, we've hired some people, and we're making that available to our senior salespeople so that you want to do it, you want to take a stab at it, don't do it blindly. Let us help you with it.
Awesome. So I love the trigger element, especially for a senior salesperson being bored, and that's an amazing one. And so the R in trim is now making this thing repeatable. And what you just mentioned, we crossed a lot of areas. It could be, I want to try something new in marketing. I want to try a new set of questions, or I realize that, with inflation, it's actually changing the way that people are investing, the psychology they have behind it. And as a financial advisor, I need to be up to date on that. So I need to get spun up. Could apply to anything. But what are the steps that you recommend a salesperson walks through, even a senior one, now that I know that I need to make a change because I'm getting bored, I want to try something new, something different, or I recognize I have to in order to meet my goals? What are the steps I need to walk through in changing how I've done something for so long?
Well, it starts with a self-assessment, right? You need to dig deep internally and decide if making some change is something that you can commit to, right? I've seen the greatest examples of lack of success that I've seen are when they're almost whimsical, when they're almost, I think I ought to do it this way. And a lot of people are really good at starting things and not finishing them, right? So I think if people invest a little more time up front in identifying what is involved with going down a certain path, and then making a realistic self-assessment as to whether or not you're going to do what needs to get done, right? You need to identify the steps that you need to take to go down a certain path and accomplish something. And then you really have to be honest with yourself and determine whether you're going to commit to doing those things that are necessary to make this a success. Or you're going to get 3 steps down the 60-step path and get bored with that and move on to something else. Right?
It's really interesting you mentioned that, because even in our mission planning in the military, we would make a great plan, but before we started sending people out there in the field to execute, it would be a full stop, and we'd ask, is this go or no go? Is the mission achievable given our resources, given the time it's going to take? So that absolutely mirrors what you're saying. We have to know, are we willing to commit to this? Because once we open the floodgates and start, charging in, that's it. There's no pulling back from that. So I love it. We've got assessing the time commitment it's going to take, assessing the steps. Am I willing to commit to this fully in order to get the results and not half-heartedly go after it? What are the next couple of steps that I should be doing in trying to commit to something new as a salesperson?
Self-assessment. Once you've committed to doing it, it's making honest self-assessments along the way, right? Taking what you said and actually maybe slightly disagreeing with it.
Okay.
In this world, you can always quit, right? You can quit something if it's not working out the way you thought it was going to work, and that's different from quitting because you didn't put the time into it. It's making a true, honest self-assessment as to whether or not continued resources down this path are worth it.
So set a check-in, a day, a week, a month, a quarter out. Am I getting the results I want? Absolutely.
Am I getting the results I want? And if you're not, don't be afraid to pull the trigger. A lot of people throw good money after bad, right? I've already invested several $1,000s in this social media campaign, and I'm not seeing anything out of it. Do you keep throwing money into it, right? And it may be that you'd make a decision to do it because you've determined that you haven't put enough time into it yet, and you need to let that build up. But you also have to be honest with yourself as to whether or not something's working. And if it isn't working, don't be afraid to pull it.
So I love it. Have the map in place. What is it going to take for me to achieve this? Have a way to kind of pull your chute and get the heck out of Dodge if you're not getting the results you need. Is there anything else that you'd recommend to salespeople build into a repeatable process for trying something new?
Well, you've got to have some way of measuring it along the lines of
what we will get to that. Don't worry. That's actually the M in trim. So don't skip ahead too far. Hold that one off. All right. So if we got a couple of great repeatable steps, And again, this could apply to any part of a sales cycle, which is why Charles and I are not getting that specific. It might be how you prospect. It might be how you have conversations. It might be how you market yourself. It might be how you close. But if you're willing to try something new as a salesperson, have a plan in place. So you're not just throwing stuff at the wall and hoping something sticks. So we've got the trigger, making this thing repeatable. Now the I in trim, Charles, is making this thing improvable. So if I'm using this process, I did a social media campaign, it worked out, I got a couple new people, I want to try something new, or I'm prospecting in a new way, asking new questions, or maybe my parent company, Coastal One, has given me some new resources, some new financial vehicles to offer. I want to make sure that I'm making this system better. So even when I try something new next quarter or next year, I'm doing it in a slightly different way. That's how we improve systems. So to give you an example of how this works in the military, really want to be able to give it to a salesperson in a good way. When we make a system improvable, we realize if we're kicking down doors and we're always banking left, as soon as we kick down a door, the first person in the door is going left. Pretty soon our enemy's figuring that out. And that's exactly where they're going to be aiming if they're in that house. So we realize we have to change up our systems, make them improvable. So what would you recommend a salesperson do to improve the way that they try something new over the course of time?
You need feedback, right? You need feedback. You need feedback from your existing clients. You need feedback from your peers, whomever's familiar enough with what you're doing to give you constructive feedback, right? Sometimes it's easy to have some blinders on, and it's one of the great things about focus is you are focused on a singular goal, but sometimes if you're too focused on that and you're not seeing what's going on around you, then you're not getting the feedback you need to determine what tweaks you need to make to what you're doing to improve it. So you might have a great system in place, but there could be one piece of it that is just not generating the feedback that you want. You need to constantly solicit feedback from the right sources, right? And assess those things as you go.
I love it. And there's a myth in the military of a solo operator, because that's what they make movies about. That one Navy SEAL or Green Beret or Marine Corps scout sniper that's off there on their own. They never talk about the fact that there's at least 300 people in a support function to make sure that one person can get their job done.
And you better believe Jason Bourne's just a movie? Is that what you're telling me?
No. That's what I'm telling you, man. It's just a movie. Even in the CIA, even in the intelligence areas. So it's absolutely critical these folks go back to their team and download what's working, figure out what's not. And if I'm a salesperson that's out there kind of on my own, like your independent advisors are, it's absolutely critical that I have that support network behind me, whether it's a virtual network, whether I can pick up the phone and call a peer in another city, or someone that has had success with the social media campaign, just to say, here's what I've been doing the last 3 months. Here's where I'm getting hung up. Any ideas for me on what I could be doing more, better, or differently? Absolutely great ways to improve. Now let's jump into the M in trim, the one that we had to skip past because I know you wanted to get into it, measuring success. Now, if I'm a senior salesperson, I'm already pretty successful. I mean, I'm probably making number, the baseline is taken care of, life is good, but I realize to get better, I got to try something new. Well, am I just measuring increased revenue? Am I just measuring pipeline velocity? What do you recommend that I measure to make sure that doing something new is measuring all of it? Well, there's a lot of things to measure. There's a lot of things to measure. So what do I focus on first?
I mean, in the end, any salesperson, no matter what the industry is, their most important measurement is revenue, right? That's the most important measurement. But you can measure a lot of things that are indicators to get that will tell you whether or not you're going to get there, right? So, if I've got 3 people in my pipeline or I've got 30 people in my pipeline, which one do you think has a greater chance of getting me to my revenue number, right? So there's a lot that you can measure, and you should, right? It does start with that. It starts with leads. It starts with pipeline. So, the bigger that pipeline, the greater your chance of ultimate success in terms of creating revenue for yourself and for your firm, and for your clients as well. So yeah, I think there are a number of things you can measure. It's funny. I'm thinking back, harkening back to those early days I referenced at the beginning of our conversation, and there was a very senior guy there then, and he made it. He said to me, this is just a game to me at this point. He said, I've made all the money I really need to make. I could retire today and be done, but I enjoy what I do. And what I enjoy is just sort of the little wins every day. And he had a book he had a book. This is, they call it a book of business because
literally a book for him.
Literally a book, right? So you had a 3-ring binder and it had the names of your clients, their pertinent information on it. And you had notes of your conversations and what kind of investments you made. And it was a book. And he would go through his book every day. And he said, I had a goal. I wanted to hit a certain number of revenue generated every day. And if I hit that number by 10 a.m., I closed my book and I went home, right? Nice. This was a semi-retired person at that point.
Yeah.
And if I didn't hit that number, I stayed until I did, right? It was a game. But what was he doing? He was measuring. He was still measuring after 50 years in this business. He was still measuring, right? So
that is it's a brilliant way to go about business. And people ask me often, Charles, what is this whole bulletproof selling thing? What does it mean to be bulletproof? Does it mean we see clients wearing bulletproof vests? And it's not quite like that. But what it is that notice the people that were on the battlefield going into these dangerous situations. The reason that they were able to walk away at the end of the day when bullets were literally flying is they participated in just what you said this salesperson did every single day. Here's my goal, and I'm going to stay here until it happens. And when it happens, I'm not just going to leave it there. I'm going to figure out, well, how do I make that happen again? What habits, what strategies, what process, what systems do I have to make sure that I didn't just luck out today by hitting a goal, that I build it into what I do tomorrow and the day after and the day after. That's what made these folks bulletproof, and it's what makes salespeople bulletproof as well. So amazing system that even a junior salesperson can use, but especially one that's already established that just wants to figure out, how do I try something new, but do it in a way that's more structured so I know whether I've had success. And it wasn't, because this has happened to me, Charles, where I try 100 different things and revenue increases, but I don't know which of the 100 levers I pulled do I need to pull again. And this is a way to make sure that you are targeted and focused on what is generating more revenue for you and your business. So for all the salespeople out there, how do we find out more about your organization? Maybe there's a financial advisor that's ready to go independent. He hears you talk and he's like, that's the type of leader I want. How do we get deeper into the world of Coastal One?
Well, thanks for that. So our website's a great place to start, www.coastal-one, spelled out, one.com. Great way to get in touch with us. That's probably the best place to start. Phone number, 888-657-5200. So that's our main number. You can call. You can ask for me.
Awesome. And Charles is active on LinkedIn as well, so please reach out to him that way if you prefer LinkedIn. And thanks so much for this insight. The wonderful thing about getting to interview folks like you, Charles, is I learn just as much as any of my listeners do, because every system that we build moves into my business too. So thanks so much for the value that you provided to me here. And of course, for all the listeners out there, for the viewers, make sure you're following us on LinkedIn and YouTube, where every single one of the conversations, like you just heard I had with Charles, are archived for free as resources for you. And if you're listening, of course, this podcast is available on iTunes, Stitcher, Spotify, anywhere that podcasts can be found. And for more sales systems, just like the one we built to help you replace hope with certainty in how you sell, make sure you're checking us out over at bulletproofselling.us. Now, Sean Rhodes here. Charles Reiling, our guest today. Thank you so much for helping us serve the sales community today, Charles. Let's get out there and make selling bulletproof.
Thanks, Sean.